Hey everyone, before I tell you this story, and I promise you, every word of it is true, please take a moment to subscribe to my channel and hit that like button. This is the hardest thing I've ever had to share, and I need to know it reaches people who will understand. Your support means everything. Now, let me tell you about the night my dead son called me. My name is David Porter. I'm 63 years old now. But this story begins when I was 43. That was the year I buried my son. His name was Michael James Porter, born April 12, 1986. Died November 3, 2005. He was 19 years old. I remember every detail of that day. The funeral was on November 8th, a Tuesday. Gray skies, cold wind cutting through my suit jacket. The funeral home had these awful fluorescent lights that made everyone look like corpses themselves. There were maybe 30 people there, family mostly, his mother's relatives, a handful of his friends from high school, kids barely out of their teens themselves, standing in uncomfortable suits they'd probably borrowed, not knowing what to say or where to look. Michael's mother, Sarah, stood beside me, but we might as well have been miles apart. She stared at the ground the entire service. Wouldn't look at the casket. Her sister had to physically hold her up because her legs kept buckling. I wanted to reach for her hand, but there was this canyon between us already. Grief does that. It isolates you even when you're surrounded by people. The service lasted 40 minutes. The pastor, some man we'd never met, said things that sounded nice but meant nothing. He talked about God's plan, about angels, about peace. I wanted to scream at him. What peace? What plan involves a 19-year-old kid dying on his way home from work? But I didn't scream. I stood there like a statue, barely breathing, trying to understand how I was supposed to live the rest of my life without my son. The accident happened 5 days earlier, on Friday, November 3rd, at approximately 10:47 p.m. Michael had been working a late shift at the grocery store. He was saving money for college. He wanted to study engineering. He was driving home in his beat-up Honda Civic, the one I'd helped him buy 2 years earlier. We'd spent a whole Saturday going to different used car lots, testing engines, checking mileage. He was so proud of that car. A semi-truck ran a red light at the intersection of Oak Street and Highway 52. The driver later said his brakes failed. The investigation confirmed it. There would be no criminal charges, just a tragic accident, a mechanical failure. The truck hit Michael's car on the driver's side. The impact was so severe that the car spun 3 times before hitting a telephone pole. According to the police report, death was instantaneous. They said he didn't suffer. They always say that. I don't know if they mean it or if it's just something they tell grieving parents. I got the call at 11:43 p.m. I remember the exact time because I was sitting in my recliner watching the late news, and I looked at the clock on the cable box when the phone rang. Sarah had already gone to bed. Something in my chest clenched the moment I heard the ring. Parents know. We just know. Mr. Porter? The voice was professional. Careful. This is Officer Martinez with the State Highway Patrol. There's been an accident involving your son. You need to come to County General Hospital immediately. The drive to the hospital is a blur. I remember going 90 miles an hour down the highway. I remember my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I remember thinking that if I just got there fast enough, everything would be fine. He'd have a broken arm, maybe a concussion, but he'd be alive. When I burst through the emergency room doors, a nurse was waiting. She had this expression, this practiced sympathy that made my blood run cold. She led me to a private consultation room. They only use those rooms for the worst news. A doctor came in. Young guy, maybe 35. Tired eyes. He sat down across from me and said the words that split my life into before and after. Mr. Porter, I'm very sorry. Your son was pronounced dead at the scene. There was nothing the paramedics could do. I don't remember what I said. I think I said no a lot. The doctor kept talking. Something about the impact, about severe trauma, about how it was quick. I couldn't hear him. There was this ringing in my ears that drowned out everything else. They asked if I wanted to see him. I said yes. They led me down a hallway to a room that smelled like disinfectant and something else I couldn't identify. Death, maybe. Does death have a smell? My son was lying on a gurney, covered with a white sheet up to his chest. His face was untouched. That's what shocked me the most. There wasn't a scratch on his face. He looked like he was sleeping. His hair was still messy the way it always was, falling across his forehead. I kept thinking he'd open his eyes any second. I touched his hand. It was still warm. That destroyed me. How could he be dead if his hand was still warm? I stood there for 2 hours, holding his hand, waiting for him to wake up. Nurses came and went. They spoke in low voices. Eventually, a doctor gently suggested I needed to step away. Sarah arrived around 2 a.m. Her sister had driven her. When she saw Michael, she started screaming. Not crying, screaming. This horrible primal sound that I still hear in my nightmares. Security had to come. They gave her something to calm her down, some kind of sedative. She couldn't stay in the room. She couldn't handle the paperwork, the decisions, any of it. I did everything alone. I identified the body formally. I signed the release forms. I contacted the funeral home. I picked out a casket, a simple oak one, nothing fancy. Michael wouldn't have wanted fancy. I chose the burial plot at Riverside Cemetery under an old oak tree. I wrote the obituary. I selected flowers. I moved through it all in this fog, this numbness that was the only thing keeping me functional. The funeral was 5 days later. They lowered him into the ground while I watched. I heard the mechanical whir of the lowering device. I heard the thud when the casket settled at the bottom of the grave. People threw flowers onto the lid. Sarah threw a letter she'd written, sealed in an envelope. I threw nothing. I just stood there staring down into that hole, thinking about how my son was inside that box and how I'd never see him again. After everyone left, I stayed. The cemetery workers started filling in the grave. Shovel by shovel, they dumped dirt onto my son's casket. I watched every single shovelful. I needed to see it finished. I needed to know he was really down there, that this was real, that my life had actually become this nightmare. When they packed down the last of the dirt, I finally walked away. Part 2. 20 years of grief. For 20 years, I visited that grave every Sunday. Didn't matter if it was raining, snowing, 100 degrees outside. I was there. I brought fresh flowers. I sat on the ground and talked to him. Told him about my week. Told him about things I couldn't tell anyone else. Sometimes I just sat in silence, my hand on the grass above where I knew his casket was. Sarah stopped coming after the first year. She said it hurt too much. She said she needed to move forward, to heal. I didn't understand how she could just stop. But everyone grieves differently. Our marriage didn't survive. How could it? We were two people drowning in the same ocean, too broken to save each other. We divorced 3 years after Michael died. It was amicable, if divorce can ever be that. We just couldn't be in the same room without the ghost of our son standing between us. Sarah remarried 5 years later. She had another child, a daughter. She built a new life. I'm happy for her, I really am. She deserved to find peace. I couldn't move on the same way. I kept Michael's room exactly the way he left it. His clothes still hung in the closet. His books were still on the shelf. His baseball mitt sat on his desk. His computer, old and outdated, still sat in the corner. Sometimes I'd go in there and just sit on his bed, running my hands over his bedspread, trying to remember what his voice sounded like. I kept his phone number in my contacts. This is going to sound crazy, but I even kept paying the bill for his cell phone for the first year. $30 a month to keep his number active, even though he'd never use it again. I'd call it sometimes, just to hear his voicemail message. "Hey, this is Michael. Leave a message." 4 seconds of his voice. I must have listened to it 1,000 times before the phone company finally disconnected the line. Even after they disconnected it, I kept the number saved in my phone. I couldn't delete it. Deleting it felt like losing him all over again. People said I needed therapy. Friends, family, co-workers. Everyone had opinions about my grief. They said I was stuck. They said I needed to let go. They meant well, but they didn't understand. You don't get over losing a child. You don't move on from it. You just learn to live with this massive, gaping hole in your life. You learn to walk carefully around it so you don't fall in. I functioned. I went to work every day. I paid my bills. I maintained my house. I went through the motions of living. But I wasn't really alive. I was just existing, waiting for my own life to end so I could see my son again. Every birthday that passed without him was torture. April 12th was the worst day of every year. He should have been 20, 21, 30, 39. Instead, he was frozen at 19 forever. Every milestone his friends reached was a knife in my chest. I watched them graduate college, get married, have children. I saw their parents posting proud photos on Facebook, bragging about grandchildren. My son never got any of that. He never fell in love, never traveled, never achieved his dreams. He was just gone. I accepted it eventually. Not in the sense that I was okay with it. I'll never be okay with it. But I accepted that this was my reality. My son was dead. I would never see him again. That was the truth I had to live with. Until September 14th of this year, when my phone rang at 2:47 in the morning, and his name lit up my screen. Part 3. The first call. I was asleep when it happened. A deep, dreamless sleep that was interrupted by the shrill ring of my phone. I jerked awake, heart pounding, disoriented in the darkness. My hand fumbled for the phone on my nightstand. The screen was bright in the dark room. I squinted at it. The caller ID said, Michael. His contact photo stared back at me. A picture from his 18th birthday. He was grinning at the camera, holding up a piece of birthday cake. I'd taken that photo. I remembered the moment. It was one of the last truly happy days we'd had as a family. I sat frozen in bed, holding the phone, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might have a heart attack. The phone kept ringing. 4 rings. 5 rings. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped it. This couldn't be real. The number had been disconnected for 19 years. I'd tried calling it hundreds of times over the years, always getting the same recorded message. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. But it was calling me now. My thumb hovered over the answer button. I couldn't move. What if it was some kind of mistake? What if it was a prank? What if I answered and heard nothing but silence? On the 6th ring, something inside me broke. I pressed the button. I lifted the phone to my ear. For 3 seconds, I heard nothing. Just silence, dead air. Then I heard breathing. Slow, steady breathing, in and out. Human. Someone was there. My throat closed up. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. Then a voice spoke. Just one word, quiet and confused and scared. Dad? My entire world stopped. I know my son's voice. I heard it every day for 19 years. I heard it in my dreams for 20 years after. This was him. Not a recording, not some trick. Him, actually him, speaking to me through the phone. My vision blurred with tears. I still couldn't speak. My body wouldn't work. Dad, are you there? The voice came again, more desperate now. Scared. I forced air into my lungs, forced words out of my throat. Michael? It came out as a whisper, broken and raw. Silence on the other end. Long, heavy silence. Then, yeah, it's me. Dad, where am I? The question didn't make sense. Where was he? What kind of question was that? What do you mean? I asked. My voice was shaking so badly I barely recognized it. Where are you calling from? More silence. I heard his breathing faster now, panicked. I don't know, he said. I don't know where I am. Nothing makes sense. Dad, something's wrong. Everything feels wrong. I stood up from my bed. My legs were weak, but I made them work. I turned on the light, needing to ground myself in reality. My son was dead. I buried him. I watched them put him in the ground. This couldn't be happening. "Michael, what's going on?" I asked. "Where have you been?" What do you ask someone who's been dead for 20 years? How do you even begin to have that conversation? He made a sound like a sob. "I don't know," he said. "I remember the accident. I remember the truck hitting me. I remember dying, Dad. I felt it. I died. But then I woke up and everything was different. I look different. I feel different. I'm in some place I don't recognize, and people walk right past me like I'm not even here. I've been trying to figure out what happened, but nothing makes sense. I found a phone, and your number was the only one I remembered." My legs gave out. I sat down hard on the edge of my bed. My son remembered dying. He knew he died. But he was talking to me. How was he talking to me? "Are you hurt?" I asked. Stupid question, but my brain wasn't working properly. "No," he said. "I'm not hurt. But I'm scared, Dad. I'm really scared. I don't understand what's happening. Can you come get me, please?" His voice broke on the word, "please." He sounded like a little boy again, lost and afraid, and needing his father. "Tell me where you are," I said. "Give me an address. I'll come right now." "I don't know the address," he said. "I'm in a building. It's dark. There are apartments. Hold on. Let me try to find something with an address on it." I heard movement through the phone. Footsteps, a door opening. Then the line went dead. Just like that. Gone. I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it. The call timer showed 9 minutes and 43 seconds. I immediately hit redial. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." I tried again. Same message. I tried 15 more times, each time getting the same recorded response. My dead son had just called me, asking for help, and then he vanished. Part 4. The search begins. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I couldn't. I sat on my bed, staring at my phone, replaying every word of the conversation in my head. His voice. The way he said "Dad." The fear in his tone. The confusion. It wasn't a recording. Recordings don't hesitate. Recordings don't ask questions. Recordings don't sound lost and scared. This was real. I had a real conversation with someone who knew things only my son would know. He knew about the accident. He knew my number. He knew who I was. But my son was dead. I saw his body. I touched his cold hand at the hospital. I watched them close the coffin. I watched them bury him 6 feet under the ground. At 6:30 a.m., as soon as the sun came up, I got dressed and drove to Riverside Cemetery. I needed to see the grave. I needed proof he was still there. The morning was cold and gray, fog hanging low over the headstones. I parked in the empty lot and walked the familiar path to the oak tree. My feet knew the way by themselves after 20 years of Sunday visits. His grave looked exactly the same as it always did. Gray stone marker, fresh flowers from my visit 3 days earlier. The ground was solid and undisturbed. No one had dug him up. No one had touched the earth. I knelt down and put my hand on the grass. It was cold and wet with morning dew. "Michael," I whispered, "are you down there?" Stupid question. Of course he was down there. I buried him myself. But then who called me? I stayed at the grave for an hour, my hand on the ground, trying to make sense of the impossible. Eventually, I had to leave. I had to figure out what was happening. The next 3 days were a nightmare of confusion and dead ends. I called the phone company. The customer service representative confirmed what I already knew. Michael's number had been disconnected in March 2006. According to their system, there had been no activity on that line in 19 years. No calls in or out. Nothing. I showed them screenshots of my call log. The representative suggested, very gently, that perhaps I should speak to someone. A counselor, a therapist. Her tone said everything. She thought I was having a breakdown. I called my ex-wife. I hadn't spoken to Sarah in over a year. When she answered and heard my voice, there was a long pause. "David, is everything okay?" "I need to ask you something," I said, "and I need you to not think I'm crazy." "Okay." She sounded wary. Have you gotten any strange phone calls recently? Anything unusual? No. Why? What's going on? I couldn't tell her. If I told her that Michael had called me, she'd think I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. Nothing, I said. Never mind. Sorry to bother you. I hung up before she could ask more questions. On the third night after the first call, September 17th at 3:15 a.m., my phone rang again. Michael's name. Michael's photo. I answered on the first ring. Michael? Dad. His voice sounded even more scared than before. I found something, an address. I'm at 247 Riverside Avenue, Apartment 8, Moorfield, West Virginia. Can you come, please? I'm so confused and scared and I don't know what to do. I'm coming, I said. Stay right there. I'm leaving right now. It'll take me about 8 hours to drive there. Can you wait 8 hours? Silence. Then, I'll try. Dad, I'm really scared. Those 3 words destroyed me. I know, I said. I'm scared too, but I'm coming, I promise. Stay on the line with me until... The call ended. Dead air. I tried calling back. The same recorded message. But this time, I had an address. Part 5. Moorfield, West Virginia. I threw clothes into a bag. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't call work. I just got in my car and started driving toward West Virginia. The drive took 8.5 hours with stops for gas and coffee. I drove the entire way in a daze, my mind spinning with impossible scenarios. What would I find when I got there? Would Michael be there? Would it be some kind of cruel hoax? Was I driving 8 hours to chase a ghost? I arrived in Moorfield around noon. It was a small town, maybe 5,000 people. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone. I stopped at a gas station and asked for directions to Riverside Avenue. The address led me to an older apartment complex on the edge of town. 3 stories, brown brick, probably built in the 1980s. The parking lot was half empty. A few kids were playing on a rusty swing set in a small courtyard. I found apartment 8 on the 2nd floor. I stood outside the door for a full minute, my hand raised to knock, my heart pounding. What if Michael answered? What if my son, dead for 20 years, opened this door? I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder. Michael, are you in there? It's Dad. Nothing. I tried the doorknob, locked. I looked around. No one was in the hallway. I knew this was wrong. I was about to break into someone's apartment, but I didn't care. I had to know. I went back down to my car and got a screwdriver from my emergency kit. I'd never picked a lock before, but I'd seen it done in movies. It took me 20 minutes of fumbling before I heard the click. The door opened. The apartment was dark. All the curtains were drawn. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, my heart in my throat. Michael? I called out. Are you here? Silence. I turned on the lights. The apartment was small, a living room, kitchenette, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom. It was furnished but sparse. A couch, a coffee table, a small TV. Everything looked old but clean. There were no personal decorations, no photos on the walls, no knickknacks. It looked like a place where someone existed but didn't really live. I walked through each room, searching for any sign of my son. In the bedroom, I found a bed with rumpled sheets, a dresser, some clothes in the closet. Men's clothes, size large. Michael had worn size large. On the nightstand, I found a wallet and a set of keys. I picked up the wallet with shaking hands and opened it. Inside was a driver's license. The photo showed a man who looked like an older version of my son. Same eyes, same nose, same slight scar on his chin from where he'd fallen off his bike at age 7. But the name on the license said, Marcus James Powell. Date of birth, April 12, 1986. The same birthday as Michael. The address matched, 247 Riverside Avenue, Apartment 8, Moorfield, West Virginia. I sat down on the bed because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. My son died 20 years ago. I buried him. But according to this license, he'd been living here, under a different name, living a life he apparently didn't remember. How was any of this possible? Part 6. The truth emerges. I spent the next 2 hours searching through everything in that apartment. I needed answers. I needed to understand what had happened to my son. In a drawer in the kitchen, I found bills addressed to Marcus Powell going back 5 years. Electric bills, water bills, all showing regular monthly payments. A normal life. In another drawer, I found pay stubs from Moorfield Manufacturing. Marcus Powell had been working there for the past 4 years. Regular paychecks, taxes paid, everything completely ordinary. In a filing cabinet in the closet, I found a lease agreement signed 3 years ago. Marcus Powell's signature, but it looked almost identical to how Michael used to sign his name, the same distinctive way he made the letter M. And then I found the medical records. They were in a manila folder at the bottom of the filing cabinet. Hospital admission records, discharge papers, prescriptions, and a file from a neurologist. I sat on the couch and read through every page, my hands shaking. According to the documents, Marcus Powell had been admitted to County General Hospital on November 3, 2005, the same hospital where my son died, the same date, the same night. He'd been in a severe car accident, multiple injuries, severe head trauma. He'd been in a coma for 6 days. When he woke up, he had complete amnesia. No memory of his life before the accident. No memory of his identity. No identification had been found at the accident scene. He became a John Doe. The hospital kept him for 3 weeks while they searched for family. No one ever came forward. No one claimed him. I read those words over and over. November 3, 2005, the night Michael died. The same hospital, the same type of accident. My hands started shaking so badly I almost dropped the papers. I kept reading. After he was released from the hospital, social services had helped him. They gave him temporary housing. They helped him get identification under the name he chose for himself, Marcus Powell. He couldn't remember his real name, so he picked a new one. He got a job. He built a life from nothing. A life as a stranger to himself. The medical records showed years of therapy, depression, anxiety, trauma from not knowing who he was. But he'd survived. He'd kept going. There was a business card clipped to the medical file. Dr. Sarah Chen, neurologist, County General Hospital. I called the number immediately. A receptionist answered. I asked to speak with Dr. Chen. She told me the doctor was with a patient but could return my call. I left my number and said it was urgent. Dr. Chen called me back 20 minutes later. I explained who I was, that I was the father of Michael Porter, who had died 20 years ago in a car accident. I told her I believed Marcus Powell might actually be my son. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Mr. Porter, she said carefully, I can't discuss patient information without consent, but I can tell you that Marcus Powell has been dealing with dissociative amnesia for 20 years. He has no memories prior to November 3, 2005. We've exhausted every medical and therapeutic avenue trying to help him recover those memories. Do you have his DNA on file? I asked. No, she said. There was never a reason to run DNA tests. He wasn't a criminal. He was just someone who lost his memory. But Mr. Porter, if you're suggesting what I think you're suggesting, this would be extraordinary. How could someone have been buried under one name while living under another? I don't know, I said, but I need to find out. Where is Marcus now? I'm at his apartment and he's not here. He works at Moorfield Manufacturing, Dr. Chen said. Afternoon shift, 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. I looked at the clock. It was 2:47 p.m. I had 13 minutes. Part 7. Face to Face. Moorfield Manufacturing was a 10-minute drive from the apartment complex. It was a large industrial building with a chain-link fence around it. The sign out front advertised auto parts manufacturing. I parked in the visitor's lot and went to the front entrance. A security guard sat at a desk inside. I'm here to see Marcus Powell, I told him. It's a family emergency. The guard called back to the floor. 5 minutes later, a man came through the double doors. He was about 5'10", brown hair starting to gray at the temples. He wore jeans and a factory uniform shirt. He looked tired. And he had my son's face. Older, yes, 20 years older. Lines around the eyes. Heavier. But the same face I'd kissed goodnight 1,000 times. The same face I'd seen cold and still on a hospital gurney 20 years ago. He looked at me with no recognition. "Can I help you?" My throat closed up. I couldn't speak. I was looking at my son, and he didn't know me. "Are you okay?" he asked. He looked concerned. I forced words out. "Your name is Marcus Powell?" "Yes. Do I know you?" "No," I said. "But I think I know you. Can we talk somewhere private?" He hesitated, looking uncertain. Finally, he nodded. "There's a break room. Follow me." We walked through the factory floor. Machines hummed and clanked. Workers glanced at us as we passed. Marcus led me to a small room with a few tables and a vending machine. We sat down across from each other. He was watching me warily. "I don't understand what this is about," he said. "You said family emergency, but I don't have any family. Not that I remember, anyway." "My name is David Porter," I said. 20 years ago, I had a son named Michael. He was 19 years old. He died in a car accident on November 3rd, 2005. Marcus went very still. His face paled. "I buried my son," I continued. "I watched them put him in the ground. But last week, I got a phone call from his old number. Someone who sounded exactly like him. He said he was confused, that he didn't know where he was or what had happened. He gave me an address. Your address." Marcus was shaking his head slowly. "That's not possible. That's insane." "I went to your apartment," I said. "I found medical records. You were admitted to County General Hospital on November 3rd, 2005, the same night my son died, the same hospital. You had severe amnesia. No one ever identified you. You've been living as Marcus Powell for 20 years, but I think you're actually Michael Porter. I think you're my son." He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loud against the floor. "You're crazy. I'm sorry about your son, but you need to leave. I'm not him. I'm Marcus Powell. I've been Marcus Powell my whole life, at least as far as I can remember." "Then why did you call me?" I asked. "Why did you give me your address?" "I didn't call anyone." His voice was rising. Other workers were starting to look through the break room window. "I don't even know who you are." "Do you have dreams?" I asked quietly. "Dreams about a different life? About being someone else?" He froze. The color drained from his face completely. "How do you know that?" he whispered. "Because my son is trying to reach out," I said. "Somehow, some way, he's trying to remember. The phone calls, I don't understand how it's possible, but they're real. I think part of you knows who you really are. I think part of you has been trying to break through the amnesia." Marcus sat back down slowly. His hands were shaking. "I have dreams," he said quietly. "All the time. Dreams about people I don't know. Places I've never been. A different name. I wake up and for a few seconds I don't know who I am. And then it fades, and I'm Marcus again, and I can't quite remember what I was dreaming about." He pulled out his phone with trembling hands. He opened his notes app and turned the phone toward me. On the screen were 3 words, written over and over. "I am Michael. I am Michael. I am Michael." Written dozens of times, filling the entire screen. "I thought I was losing my mind," Marcus said. His voice cracked. "I thought the amnesia was making me crazy. But you just said that name. A complete stranger just said the name from my dreams. How is that possible?" I pulled a DNA test kit from my pocket. I'd stopped at a pharmacy on the way to the factory. My hands were shaking as I set it on the table between us. "I need to ask you something," I said, "and I need you to trust me, even though you don't know me. Will you let me take a DNA sample, just a cheek swab? It won't hurt. It'll take 10 seconds. Marcus stared at the kit, then at me. "Why?" he asked. "What's going on?" I looked into his eyes. Michael's eyes. "Because I think you're my son," I said. "I think you're Michael, and I think you've been alive this whole time, living a life you can't remember. If I'm wrong, The test will prove it, and you'll never see me again. But if I'm right, don't you want to know? Don't you want to finally understand who you are?" Marcus didn't move for a long time. He just stared at me with an expression I couldn't read. Fear, confusion, and something that looked almost like hope. "Your son is dead," he finally said. His voice was flat, careful. "You said you lost him. That means he's gone." I nodded. Tears ran down my face, and I didn't wipe them away. "I buried him 20 years ago," I said. "I watched them put him in the ground. I visited his grave every week for 2 decades, but 3 weeks ago he called me. Twice. From a phone number that's been disconnected for 19 years. He told me he didn't understand what was happening. He gave me your address. And when I got here, I found an apartment full of photos and a note in my son's handwriting saying he didn't know who he was anymore." Marcus took a step backward. His face had gone white. "That's not possible," he said, but his voice shook. I held up the DNA kit again. "Then prove me wrong," I said. "Take the test. If I'm crazy, it'll come back negative and you'll never see me again. But if I'm right, if you're Michael, don't you want to know? Don't you want to finally understand who you are?" His hand went to his mouth. He pressed his knuckles against his lips like he was trying to hold back words or screams. "I died in my dreams," he whispered. "I remember dying. I remember the accident, the impact, everything going dark. I remember feeling my life end." "So do I said. "I remember getting the call that you were dead. I remember identifying your body at the hospital. I remember every second of your funeral. But what if we were both wrong? What if something happened that night that no one understood?" Marcus closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. "If you're telling the truth," he said slowly, "if I'm really your son, that means I lost 20 years. 20 years of life I should have had with you, with my real family. 20 years living as the wrong person." His voice broke. "How do I come back from that?" "We figure it out together," I said. I stepped closer and held out the kit again. "One step at a time. But first, we need to know the truth." He stared at the kit for another long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out and took it. Part 8. The results. The DNA test took 2 weeks. They were the longest 2 weeks of my life. Marcus, I still couldn't think of him as Michael, not yet, agreed to meet with me several times while we waited. We sat in diners and coffee shops, talking carefully around the elephant in the room. I told him stories about Michael's childhood, the time he broke his arm falling out of a tree, his obsession with Star Wars, his terrible singing voice, the way he used to do this thing where he'd wiggle his ears when he was thinking. Marcus listened quietly. Sometimes his hand would go to his ear. Once, he started humming a tune, the Star Wars theme, and then stopped abruptly, looking confused about why he knew it. "I remember things sometimes," he told me one afternoon. "Not full memories, just flashes. A smell that seems familiar. A song that I somehow know all the words to. Places in my dreams that feel real, but I can never hold on to them. It's like trying to grab smoke." On October 1st, I got the call from the DNA lab. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely answer the phone. "Mr. Porter, this is Dr. Martinez from Gene Lab. I have the results of your paternity test." I couldn't breathe. "And?" "The results are conclusive. The probability of paternity is 99.99%. Marcus Powell is your biological son." I sat down hard on my couch. The room was spinning. "Mr. Porter, are you still there?" "Yes," I managed. Thank you so much." I hung up and immediately called Marcus. He answered on the first ring. "It's positive," I said. "You're Michael. You're my son." Silence on the other end. Then I heard him crying, not sobbing, just quiet tears. After a minute, he spoke. "What do we do now?" "I don't know," I said honestly, "but we'll figure it out. Together." Part 9. Reconstruction. Over the next few weeks, we started piecing together what had happened that night 20 years ago. Dr. Chen, the neurologist, was able to access old hospital records from November 2005. What we discovered was horrifying in its simplicity. There had been 2 major accidents that night within an hour of each other. Michael's accident at 10:47 p.m. at the intersection of Oak Street and Highway 52, and another accident at 11:43 p.m. on Highway 52, about 5 miles away. Both victims were young men, approximately the same age and build. Both were brought to County General Hospital within an hour of each other. Both were in critical condition with severe head trauma. One of them died at 11:43 p.m. The other one survived, but fell into a coma. In the chaos of the emergency room that night, with multiple trauma cases coming in, someone made a terrible mistake. They assumed the victim who died was Michael Porter because his car had been identified at the first accident scene. They never checked for a wallet or ID on the body. The impact had been too severe. The survivor, covered in blood and unconscious, was brought in as a John Doe from the second accident scene. His car had caught fire. There was no ID, no wallet, nothing to identify him. What they didn't realize was that the John Doe was actually Michael Porter, and the deceased victim was Christopher Hayes, a 19-year-old runaway with no family, no one looking for him. They'd identified the wrong body. I had buried Christopher Hayes thinking he was my son, and my actual son had woken up 6 days later with no memory of who he was, and no one had ever connected the dots. "How is that even possible?" Marcus asked when we finally had all the pieces. "How did no one notice?" "Because no one was looking," I said. "Christopher Hayes had no family. No one reported him missing. No one claimed his body. And you woke up with complete amnesia. You couldn't tell anyone who you really were because you didn't know." Marcus put his head in his hands. 20 years, he said. 20 years I could have been home. 20 years you thought I was dead. How do we move forward from this?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But we're going to try." I contacted the cemetery and requested an exhumation. After explaining the situation and providing the DNA evidence, they agreed. Christopher Hayes' remains were properly identified and moved to a grave with his real name on the stone. It was the least I could do for him, giving him back his identity, even in death. The phone calls stopped after the DNA results came back. Michael's old number never lit up my screen again. Whatever had reached across the impossible divide between us, whether it was his subconscious mind, some kind of psychic phenomenon, or something I'll never understand, it was finished. It had accomplished what it needed to do. It had brought me to my son, Marcus, Michael, and I meet regularly now. We're rebuilding our relationship slowly. He can't remember being my son, can't remember his childhood or our life together. Those memories may never come back, but we're creating new memories. He's met his mother. That was hard. Sarah broke down completely when she saw him. She couldn't believe it. She's been seeing a therapist to process it all. They're taking it slow, but they're trying. Michael kept his apartment in Moorfield and his job at the factory. That's his life, the one he built. But he drives down to visit me every other weekend. We're learning each other again. He's not the 19-year-old boy I lost. He's a 39-year-old man with his own life, his own experiences, his own personality shaped by 20 years I wasn't part of. But he's my son. The DNA proves it. His face proves it. The small mannerisms that are slowly emerging. The way he runs his hand through his hair when he's nervous. The way he laughs. The way he still wiggles his ears when he's thinking hard about something. All of it proves what my heart knew the moment I heard his voice on that impossible phone call. Conclusion. Sometimes people ask me if I'm angry about what happened. If I'm angry about the mistake that stole 20 years from both of us. If I'm angry at the hospital, the police, the universe itself for this cruel twist of fate. I'm not angry. I'm grateful. I'm grateful that he survived that accident at all. I'm grateful that he built a life for himself despite having no memory of where he came from. I'm grateful for the impossible phone calls that brought us back together. I'm grateful for every day I get to see him now, to talk to him, to know he's alive. I lost 20 years with my son. I grieved him. I mourned him. I thought he was gone forever. But he wasn't gone. He was just lost. And now he's found. I still visit the cemetery sometimes, but not to mourn anymore. I visit Christopher Hayes's grave. I bring him flowers. He has no family to remember him, so I remember him. He deserves that. Every person deserves to be remembered. My son's old grave under the oak tree is empty now. Sometimes I sit there anyway, thinking about the strange journey that brought us to this point, about the impossible phone calls in the middle of the night, about a dead man's voice saying, "Dad?" About a son who forgot who he was but somehow found his way home. People tell me it's a miracle. Maybe it is, or maybe it's just life showing me that some bonds can't be broken, even by death itself, even by amnesia, even by 20 years of separation. My son was buried 20 years ago, except he wasn't. He was alive the whole time, living under a different name, waiting for the moment when the fog in his mind would clear enough for him to reach out for help. And somehow, impossibly, he found me. I don't understand how the phone calls happened. I don't understand how a disconnected number can ring. I don't understand how he knew my number when he couldn't remember anything else. Dr. Chen has theories about the subconscious mind, about buried memories trying to surface. Other people have different theories, spiritual, supernatural, scientific. I don't need to understand it. I just need to be grateful for it. Because my son came back from the dead. Not the way I expected. Not as the boy I remembered, but as the man he became. And that's more than I ever dared to hope for during those 20 years of Sunday visits to an empty grave. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. I know it sounds impossible. I know parts of it don't make sense, but I'm looking at the DNA results right now. I'm looking at photos of Michael, on my phone. He sent me a text this morning saying he'll be here for dinner on Saturday. My dead son sent me a text message, and I get to have dinner with him this weekend. If that's not a miracle, I don't know what is. So to anyone out there who's lost someone, who's grieving, who thinks their story is over, don't give up hope. The universe works in ways we can't understand. Sometimes the impossible happens. Sometimes the dead come back. Sometimes you get a second chance you never thought you'd have. Hold on to that hope. You never know when your phone might ring in the middle of the night with the voice you thought you'd never hear again. Thank you for watching. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Share this story with anyone who needs to believe in miracles. And remember, love doesn't die, even when we think it does. Sometimes it just waits in the dark, looking for a phone to call home. God bless you all.